A bank called me in a Kroger parking lot and told me my house has been paid off for years. I didn't pay it off. I just found out who did. Opening the call. I almost didn't answer. It was a Thursday afternoon in late October, 3 weeks after we buried my mother, and I was sitting in my car in the Kroger parking lot on Morse Road with the engine still running and a grocery list on my phone that felt like it had been written by someone who believed in a future I wasn't sure I had access to yet. Eggs. Greek yogurt. That detergent Mom liked. I had written that last one and then stared at it for 4 minutes and not deleted it. Since the funeral, I had been letting unknown numbers go to voicemail. Grief does that. It makes every incoming thing feel like it could be the thing that finally breaks whatever is holding you upright. Solicitations, insurance follow-ups, the dentist reminding you about a cleaning. You learn, in the weeks after a death, that the world has no protocol for mourning. It just keeps calling. But something made me pick up. Is this Sarah Bellingham? The voice was professional, measured, the kind of voice trained to deliver news without inflection. Yes. My name is Donna Marsh. I'm an estate coordinator at First Regional Bank of Ohio. I'm sorry for your loss. We have a record of your mother's passing. I'm contacting you because Margaret Bellingham listed you as the primary beneficiary on an account held with us. A pause. There's also a matter related to a mortgage we'd like to discuss with you. In person, if possible. I said, I'm sorry, a mortgage? She said, yes. We'd like to go over some details with you in person. Would you be available Monday morning? I said I would. I gave her my email. I wrote down the address. I said thank you in the voice I use when I'm performing competence I don't actually have access to. Then I sat in the Kroger parking lot for 22 minutes after the call ended. I didn't go in for the groceries. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table, the one I bought at a garage sale when I was 27, the one that has a water ring on the left side from a houseplant I killed in 2016, and I looked at my hands and tried to remember the last thing my mother said to me. It was drive safe. It was always drive safe. I bought my house when I was 26 years old. A 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb on the northeast side of Columbus. Cream siding, black shutters, a front porch that needed work, a backyard that needed more. $187,000. First-time buyer. Terrified in the specific way you are terrified when you are doing something real for the first time and the paperwork makes the realness impossible to look away from. I scraped together $11,000 for the down payment working double shifts as a hospital administrator at Ohio Health. I was making $54,000 a year. I had run the numbers on a spreadsheet. I am an administrator, spreadsheets are the grammar of my thinking, and the numbers said it was tight but manageable. $1,047 a month. Tight but manageable. I had looked at those numbers so many times they had stopped feeling like numbers and started feeling like a fact of my life, like the color of the kitchen or the way the third stair creaked. My mother came to the closing. She drove in from her apartment in Westerville in her 2009 Buick, the one with the dented rear bumper she'd had since I was in college and never replaced because she said it still drove fine and she wasn't made of money. She wore her good blouse. I knew it as her good blouse because she wore it to my college graduation and my promotion ceremony and every occasion that mattered enough to require it. Navy blue. A small pearl button at the collar. She sat in the hard chair across from the title attorney and didn't say much. She signed nothing. She was there as a witness, as a mother, as the woman who had raised me alone since I was 9 years old when my father left and never made much effort to come back. She watched me sign my name 11 times. She didn't cry. My mother was not a crier. In the parking lot after, she hugged me. Held on a beat longer than usual. Then she stepped back and looked at my face and said, "Your father would have been proud." And then, "Drive safe." She got in the Buick. I watched her go. I drove to my new house, sat in my new driveway, and cried by myself for about 10 minutes. Happy crying, mostly. The specific relief of a thing you were afraid of turning out to be real and survivable. I thought that was the whole story of how I got my house. The bank meeting. I went to First Regional Bank of Ohio on a Monday morning in early November. The branch was on Broad Street, nondescript, beige carpet, one of those lobbies that smells like recycled air and mild institutional anxiety. Donna Marsh was 52, give or take, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a manila folder in front of her and the particular careful kindness of someone who has delivered difficult news in pleasant rooms many times before. She offered me coffee. I said yes because I needed something to do with my hands. She opened the folder. "Your mother opened an account with us in March of 2012, she said. "A separate personal checking account. You were not listed on the account, and we have no record of you being made aware of it." March 2012. I bought my house in February 2012. Beginning in March of 2012, Donna continued, your mother established a recurring transfer from this account to your mortgage servicer. The transfers occurred on the 15th of every month. She paused. They continued without interruption until your mother's passing last month. I set down the coffee cup. How many transfers? I asked. Administrator brain. Specificity first. 132. 132 months. 11 years. My mortgage term was 30 years. I had 11 years left. Donna slid a document across the table. A single page. I looked at it for a long time without speaking. It had my name on it, my address, my loan number. And at the bottom, in the column labeled Current Principal Balance, a number I had never seen on any mortgage statement I had ever received. $0. Your mortgage has been paid in full, Donna said. The title is clear. Your home is yours, with no lien. I looked at the number. I looked at it the way you look at something when you're trying to decide if it's real. She paid it off, I said. Yes. The whole thing. The remaining principal at the time she began making transfers was approximately $176,000. She paid it in full over 11 years. Donna's voice was steady and gentle. We wanted to make sure you received the payoff documentation properly, and to inform you of the remaining balance in her account, which transfers to you as the named beneficiary. I asked, what was the remaining balance? $4,140. I sat with that number. $4,140. 11 years of transferring money, month after month after month, and what was left when she died was $4,140. The math of that, what it implied about the math of her life, started assembling itself in my head without my permission. I have a problem with that. My brain does math when it should probably be doing something else. I drove home. I went inside. I sat at the kitchen table again, the one with the water ring, in my fully paid-off house, and I built a spreadsheet. My mother was a retired school librarian. She had worked at Westerville North for 27 years. Her pension was $2,840 a month. Her Social Security was $1,190 a month. Her total monthly income was $4,030. Her rent was $780 a month. Her apartment was on the second floor of a building on State Street, 2 rooms and a galley kitchen and a window that looked out over a parking lot. I had been there hundreds of times. I knew the view from that window. I had never once thought to ask what she paid for it. The mortgage transfers, I found 11 years of records in the folder Donna had copied for me, ranged from $600 to $900 a month, varying slightly as I refinanced in 2017 and again in 2020 and my payment adjusted. The average was approximately $730. $730 out of $4,030. Every month. For 11 years. That was between 18 and 22% of everything she had. Every month. Gone before she paid her electricity, before she bought groceries, before she renewed her medications. She had taken almost a fifth of her income and moved it, quietly, on the 15th of every month, into an account designed to do one thing, make sure my foundation held. What remained for her life? The $780 apartment. The Buick she never replaced. Her phone. She had one of those older Samsung models, the ones with the slightly cracked screen she kept meaning to get fixed. Her grocery trips to the Aldi on Cleveland Avenue. Her library card. She had kept her library card even after she retired, which I had always found charming, a librarian who still used the library. Her medications. She had taken 3 daily prescriptions for the last 4 years of her life, and I had occasionally offered to help with the cost, and she had always said, I'm fine, I've got it. She had it. She just also had my mortgage. My mother never took a vacation in 11 years. Not once. We had talked, vaguely and repeatedly, about taking a trip together. Something small, a long weekend in the Smokies, maybe the trip to Savannah she had mentioned wanting to take since I was a teenager. It had never happened. I had assumed it was because she didn't want to travel, that she was a homebody, that the idea appealed more than the execution. It was because she was paying a mortgage. I sat with the spreadsheet for 3 days. I built it out as far as I could take it, every year, every transfer, every number I had. The spreadsheet told me, in the language I used to understand the world, what she had done. It couldn't tell me why. Or rather, it couldn't tell me why she had never said a word. For that, I called her friends. Update 1. What her friends told me. My mother's 2 closest friends were women she had known since before I was born, more or less. Janet Kowalski, 71, who had taught 4th grade at the same school district for 30 years and still babysat her grandchildren with an energy that embarrassed everyone younger than her. And Carol Simmons, 74, who had met my mother at a church book club in 1994 and had lunch with her at least twice a month for 3 decades, right up until the end. I called them both in the second week of November. I asked Janet first, "Did you know about the account?" She was quiet for a moment, the specific quiet of someone deciding how much to say, measuring the weight of information against the grief of the person asking. Then, she mentioned it once. Early on, I think. Maybe 2013. She said she'd set something up for you. Another pause. I asked her if you knew about it. She said. Janet stopped. She said, she doesn't need to know. She needs to believe she did it herself. I had to put the phone down. I set it face down on the kitchen table, and I pressed both hands flat on the wood, and I breathed. In the way you breathe when something hits a place you didn't know was there. Not a soft place, exactly, but an old one. A place that had been load-bearing for 11 years without your knowledge. She needs to believe she did it herself. I picked up the phone. Thank you, Janet, I said. Thank you. Carol told me something slightly different. Carol had known my mother at a depth that I, her daughter, had perhaps never accessed. The depth available only to women who have been friends for 30 years and have witnessed each other's losses and adjustments without the distortion of the parent-child relationship. Your mother talked about you constantly, Carol said. Your job, your house, how you'd made something real from scratch. She was so proud. I mean that, it was a genuine pride, not a performing kind. She paused. But I think she was also afraid. Not of you knowing, exactly, but of what knowing would do to the way you held yourself. You know how you are, Sarah. You've always needed to know you did things yourself. She knew that about you. I think she thought she could give you the house, or she could give you the confidence, but she couldn't give you both if you knew about the account. So she gave you both and kept the secret. I thanked Carol. I hung up. I sat in my living room, the room where I had called my mother from the couch on hard months, stressed about money, and she had said you're okay, you've always figured it out, and I thought about what Carol had said. She thought she could give you the house, or she could give you the confidence, but she couldn't give you both if you knew. She was right. I hate that she was right. I have known this about myself, abstractly, since my 30s, that my confidence and my independence are intertwined in ways that are not always rational, that my sense of having built something real depends on believing I built it with my own hands. I know this. I have talked about it in therapy. I have identified it as both a strength and a limitation. My mother had known it since I was 9 years old, watching me figure out how to be okay after my father left. She had watched me figure things out for 28 more years after that. And she had understood, with a clarity I had never quite applied to myself, that the gift of the house and the gift of believing I'd earned it were both real gifts, and they could only coexist in silence. She made the choice. 132 consecutive months. She never wobbled. Update 2. Sitting with a complicated thing. I want to be honest here, because I think people expect a story like this to be purely about gratitude, and mine wasn't. Not at first. Not entirely. I have been in therapy since I was 31, not because anything catastrophic happened, but because I had the good fortune of health insurance and a therapist I liked, and I have stayed because it turns out there is always something worth sorting through, and I have learned not to rush the complicated feelings toward the simple ones. They don't go faster that way. They just go underground. I was grateful. Deeply, structurally, in my bones grateful in a way that sometimes arrived as something closer to vertigo. The sensation of realizing the ground you thought you were standing on had always had more support beneath it than you knew. I was also grieving, not only my mother, who I had been grieving for 3 weeks already, but the particular version of the past 11 years I thought I'd had. The version where I did it alone. The version where the tight months were mine to white-knuckle through on the strength of my own discipline and planning and stubborn refusal to fail. That version was not false, exactly. I had worked, I had been disciplined, I had figured it out, but it was incomplete in a way that changed its texture entirely. And underneath the gratitude and the grief, there was something else. Something I am not entirely comfortable naming, but which my therapist has encouraged me to name anyway, because unnamed things tend to work on you from below. I was angry. Not at my mother. Let me be precise about that, because I feel the precision matters. I was not angry at my mother. I was angry at the silence. At 11 years of a thing that shaped my life happening without my knowledge. At the pride I had taken in my independence that was, not false, not exactly, but constructed in part on a foundation I hadn't known was there. I had felt proud of myself for doing something hard. I had done something hard. And I had also been helped, invisibly, in ways that would have changed how I understood the doing of it. My therapist listened to all of this without rushing it toward resolution. Both things can be true, she said eventually. You built something real, and she helped you build it. Those aren't contradictory. The house is real. Your work is real. Her contribution is also real. She didn't diminish what you did by helping you do it. She just did it quietly enough that you couldn't see the help. I know this is true. It took me about 6 weeks to feel it. What I kept coming back to, in those weeks, was the sentence her friend had reported: she doesn't need to know. She needs to believe she did it herself. I turned it over the way you turn over a stone you found somewhere unexpected, looking at it from every angle, trying to understand what it was. It was not deception, exactly. It was not her telling me something false. It was her withholding something true in service of another truth, a truth she understood about me better than I understood it about myself. It was love operating at a level of specificity that I found, and still find, almost impossible to look at directly. She didn't think I needed a safety net. She thought I needed to believe I didn't have one. And she was right. The months when I was scared, and there were months when I was scared, months when the car needed work and the medical bill came and I sat down with a spreadsheet and found a way through by the skin of my teeth and felt, afterward, the quiet confidence of someone who had survived a hard thing. Those months made me. That confidence made me. My mother watched me build it, and she kept the account open, and she never said a word. The last thing she ever said to me was drive safe. She said it because she had been keeping me safe for 11 years in ways I could not see, and it was the only part she could say out loud. Update 3. The house, seen differently. On the Sunday after the bank meeting, I walked through my house. I have lived here for 11 years. I know every room, every ceiling crack, the way the kitchen faucet drips slightly if you don't turn it the whole way, the draft in the back bedroom in January that I have never fully addressed, the way the light comes in through the front windows in the late afternoon in October and makes everything gold in a way that always stops me briefly, no matter how many times I've seen it. I walked through it slowly, differently, the way you walk through a place when you understand it for the first time. The kitchen where I have had dinner parties and sad nights and ordinary Tuesdays that blur together into the texture of a life. The bedroom where I slept through the good years and the hard ones, the ones where work was difficult and the ones where I was lonely and the ones where everything felt, briefly and unexpectedly, like exactly what I had worked for. The backyard where I planted a garden in 2015 that mostly died and a rosebush in 2018 that didn't. The living room where I called my mother from the couch, stressed, and she said, "You're okay, you've always figured it out." She knew. She said it knowing she was part of why I was okay, and knowing she would never say so, and knowing I would never ask. I stood in the living room for a long time. The house is mine. Fully, finally, on paper as it has apparently always been in practice. Clean title, no lien, a 3-bedroom colonial in Columbus worth $334,000 at current market. I had it appraised the week after the bank meeting, not for any practical reason, just to know, just to have a number to attach to the weight of what she had done. She paid $176,000 of it. I paid the rest, the down payment I scraped together from double shifts, the refinancing costs, the 11 years of property taxes and maintenance and the new water heater in 2019 and the roof repair in 2021. We did it together. She just didn't tell me. I thought about something I had read once years ago, in an essay I can't locate the source of anymore but have never entirely forgotten. That love is not a feeling but a practice, a set of recurring choices made in ordinary time, often invisible to the person receiving them. I had always found that idea compelling in the abstract. I had not understood, until that Sunday afternoon, how literal it could be. 132 choices, made on the 15th of every month, invisible. A practice sustained for 11 years without acknowledgement or thanks or even the modest satisfaction of being known. That is not a sacrifice. That is a devotion. I sat down on the living room floor, not in a chair, on the floor, which is not something I do, and I stayed there for a while and let it be as big as it was. Update 4. What I did with the $4,140. The remaining balance in her account was $4,140. I closed the account. I withdrew the money in cash, which felt right in a way I couldn't articulate. The physicality of it, the paper of it, the realness of holding in my hands what was left of 11 years of careful subtraction. I drove home with it in an envelope in my purse and I sat with it for a day before I decided what to do. My mother had a favorite garden nursery. A small family-run place out on Sunbury Road called Hartley's. The kind of establishment that has been there for 40 years and smells like damp earth and fertilizer and something green and specific to the work of growing things. She went every spring without fail. She brought home annuals for her apartment balcony, petunias, usually, and sometimes begonias, and she tended them with a consistency that I now understand as characteristic. My mother was consistent. In everything. Especially the things no one saw. I went to Hartley's on a Saturday morning in mid-November, which is not prime planting season and which the woman at the counter noted, gently, when I told her what I wanted to spend. I told her I was aware of the timing. I told her I wanted to spend $4,140 on plants for a backyard in a Columbus suburb and that I was prepared to do the work of planting them and maintaining them and I would figure out the rest. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "Come on, let me show you what we have." I spent the entire amount. Perennials, mostly. Plants that come back, plants that don't need to be replaced each year, plants that will do their work without my intervention once I give them the right start. Peonies and coneflowers and black-eyed Susans and Russian sage and 2 more rose bushes to keep company with the one that had survived since 2018. A small ornamental apple tree for the back corner. Hostas for the shaded area along the fence where nothing had ever grown well and where I had mostly given up trying. I spent the entire Saturday planting them. My knees hurt. My back hurt. My hands were dirty in the good way that hands get dirty when you've done something real with them. The rose bush that didn't die, the one I had planted in 2018 for no reason I could remember except that I had wanted something living back there, stood in its corner and watched me work. I did not take a photo for social media. I did not tell anyone what I was doing or why. It was between me and my mother and the backyard. Update 5. Inheritance enacted. Month 3 after the bank meeting, I started thinking about what came next. My mortgage payment was $1,047. It had been $1,047 a month for the last cycle of my refinancing, a number I had known as intimately as my own name for years, a fixed point in the budget of my life. It was no longer a payment I needed to make, which meant it was $1,047 a month that was suddenly available to do something. I spent 2 months not doing anything with it, just letting it sit, just grieving and adjusting to the new shape of things. Then I started thinking about what my mother would have done. She would have saved it, quietly, without telling anyone, for someone else. I am not my mother, and I don't have her particular genius for sustained invisible action. I am louder, I make spreadsheets instead of secrets, I process out loud in ways she never did, but I have inherited her practicality, and her practicality had a useful message. You now have resources you did not have before. Do something real with them. I saved the $1,047 every month for 8 months. I talked to a financial advisor, a woman my therapist referred me to who had the useful quality of not making me feel like my scale of investment was too small to take seriously. I looked at the Columbus market. I talked to a real estate attorney. I ran numbers because I run numbers. I found a duplex 4 streets from my house. $229,000. 2 units. One occupied by a retired couple who had lived there for 6 years and who, the seller assured me, were the kind of tenants who reported maintenance issues promptly and paid on the first and had no interest in leaving. The other unit vacant, recently renovated, a 2-bedroom with good light and a working fireplace and a backyard that needed work. I put 20% down, $45,800, assembled from the 8 months of saved mortgage payments plus a small portion from my mother's estate that her financial account, not the secret one but the regular one, had passed to me after probate. I closed on a Tuesday in July. February 2012, I closed on my house. July 2023, I closed on the duplex. Both on Tuesdays. I didn't plan it that way. I noticed it afterward, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the title company, and I thought, she would find that funny, in the dry way she found things funny, the private amusement she never quite let reach her face. I advertised the vacant unit. I had applications within a week. Columbus is a solid rental market, and the renovation was good. I went through them carefully. I was looking for something specific, though I hadn't named it precisely until I found it. Her name is Danielle Carter. She is 24 years old. She is a hospital administrator at Mount Carmel, same health system I started in, almost exactly my entry-level salary, the same tight but manageable math. She had just moved to Columbus from Dayton, first apartment on her own, good references, a deposit ready, a careful way of talking about her budget that I recognized from the inside. I set the rent at $50 below market. My financial advisor raised an eyebrow. I told her I knew. I did not tell Danielle why. I did not tell her about my mother or the account or the 11 years of transfers. I told her she had good references and the timeline worked and I hoped she'd be comfortable there. She thanked me with a particular warm relief of someone who had been looking for a while and was not expecting good news. She moves in next month. I have already had the fireplace inspected and confirmed working. The backyard is cleared and ready. I left the garden space visible. There's good light back there, good soil. She'll do with it whatever she decides to do. Resolution: the grave, and after. I went to my mother's grave on the 1-year anniversary of her death. She is buried in Westerville, in a cemetery she had picked out herself years before she needed it, with a practical, unsentimental forethought that characterized everything she did. She had prepaid the plot, specified the stone, noted her preferences in a file she kept in the middle drawer of her desk labeled, with her particular archival efficiency, Final Arrangements. I had found the file 3 days after she died and had felt, through the grief, a wave of gratitude so specific it was almost funny. She had made it easy. She had always made things easier for me than I knew. I brought no flowers. She had told me once, when her own mother died, when I was 16 and observing the rituals of grief for the first time, that flowers at graves were for the living and not the dead, that the dead did not have an opinion about flowers, and that you should save your money and your sentiment for the living who needed both. My mother was practical about everything, including the things that most people are not practical about. I brought instead a printed copy of the mortgage payoff statement. 1 page. My name, my address, my loan number. $0 in the balance column. I had printed it at work on good paper, the kind we use for official documents, and I had folded it twice and carried it in my coat pocket. I sat with it for a while in the November cold. The cemetery was quiet. Weekday, mid-morning, no one else nearby. The stone had her name and her years and, below them, the words she had selected herself from the options the funeral home offered. She was here. 3 words. My mother's economy of language, applied to her own epitaph. I thought about a lot of things sitting there. About the closing in 2012 and the good blouse and the hard chair. About 132 transfers on the 15th of every month. About the Buick with the dented bumper and the apartment with the parking lot view and the trips to the Smokies we never took. About Danielle Carter, 24 years old, about to move into a 2-bedroom with good light and a working fireplace and a landlord who set the rent $50 below market and didn't explain why. I thought about the spreadsheet I built in November, the one that quantified 11 years of her sacrifice into a number that still makes me feel like I'm standing on a high place when I look at it directly. I thought about my therapist saying both things can be true and about how long it took me to feel it after I knew it. I thought about Carol telling me that my mother understood something about me, about the relationship between my confidence and my independence, that I hadn't quite understood about myself. I thought about the last thing she said to me. Drive safe. I didn't say much sitting there. I am not a woman who talks to graves. I don't think my mother would have been, either, but there was one thing that needed to be said, and I said it plainly. I know now. Thank you. I folded the mortgage payoff statement and set it against the stone. The November wind would take it eventually. That was fine. It had served its purpose. I drove home safe. Reflection. My mother was a retired school librarian who drove a 2009 Buick and lived in a 2-room apartment and never asked for anything and never said she needed anything and never once mentioned the account. She paid my mortgage for 11 years. She came to my closing in her good blouse and sat in the hard chair and signed nothing and drove home and opened a transfer to my mortgage servicer the very next month. She called me every Sunday after that, every Sunday, without exception, 52 Sundays a year for 11 years, and never said a word about it. She told me I was okay, I had always figured it out, and she said it knowing she was part of why I was okay, knowing she would never say so, knowing I would never know. I know now. I own my house. I own it because I worked for it and scraped for it and white-knuckled through the hard months and believed, sincerely, that I was doing it alone, and because my mother loved me in the quietest, most expensive, most invisible way I have ever been loved. Those 2 things are both true. My therapist was right. Both things were always true. I just only knew one of them. I planted her favorite flowers in the backyard. The peonies will come up in May. The rosebush that never quit has company now. The ornamental apple tree will take a few years to establish itself properly, which seems right. The best things take time and quiet attention and a willingness to work without seeing results immediately. I charge my tenant $50 below market. I have not told her why. I call my mother's friends on Sundays now, Janet and Carol, both of them, alternating weeks, just to talk, just to say her name to people who knew her the way you can only know someone over decades, in the accumulated detail of a long friendship. They tell me things about her I didn't know. I write them down. I am building a different kind of spreadsheet now, one that isn't about money. I drive safe. I always drive safe. She asked me to, every time, for the last 11 years and probably before that too, and now that I understand what it meant, now that I understand that she had been keeping me safe in ways I couldn't see, and that drive safe was the only piece of it she could say out loud, I take it as seriously as she meant it. It is the most literal instruction she ever gave me. It is the most she could tell me of everything she was doing. 132 transfers and a paid-off house and a good blouse at a closing on a Tuesday in February, and the last thing she ever said to me was drive safe. So I do. It's the least I can do. It's the most I have left.